basically. The push comes to shove.
And good morning. LB filling in again this morning for Jeff Hood. And in the studio with me is the one and only Stan Prochowski.
Thank you. And I will confirm that LB is in fact here for Jeff Hood.
Yes.
Because you're sitting right across the table from me.
Right across there.
You know, you get stuck with it. He's on vacation, I hear.
Well, he's somewhere.
Yeah. Well, he's taking some probably needed time off.
Well, he's off every day, but he's not working
There
this
you
week.
go. And of course, we can pick on him because he's not here to defend himself, right?
He's probably listening.
He probably is. Yeah. No, I think one of the things I said when you told me he was on vacation, the first words that come out of my mouth is, "How do I get a job where you get vacation?" Yeah. I give all my employees vacation, but sometimes I have to struggle to. Actually, have one of my employees actually gets up with me and said, "Hey, tell me what you guys want to do, and I'll schedule everything for you. I'll do all that for you." Because otherwise it doesn't get done. Right? Yeah. So my wife always wanted to. This August, the 29th, we'll be 39 years married. Okay? And for our 40th, we talked for a couple of years. For our 40th, we thought we'd like to go to Hawaii because I've not been, and neither has she. And so I started putting the preliminaries of that together. And then she said she kind of changed her mind. She doesn't want to go to Hawaii now. So I don't know. We'll be doing something for our anniversary, but I don't know. I mean,
hey, tell her you booked a vacation for you. You had to do it a year out, that you're going to spend a week with the Amish.
There you go. Get down to basics, right?
Yeah, get down to basics.
Anyway, yeah, be 39 years, the 29th of this month.
Man,
I better remember that. See, it's not only 8 days away.
Yeah.
All right. So, how's everything good with LB?
Well, right now it is. They hadn't nobody made me mad yet. So
there you go. Good. Well, that's a good start. I mean, it's all downhill from here, right?
It's all downhill from here.
So, one of the first things we talk about on this show is one, we remind people it's a interactive show, and you can call in, ask a question, share an experience, or something like that. The phone number is 931 766-9393. It's right behind you. I had to always check because, there's 766 and 762, and I just never can remember that one part. 766-9393 if you want to participate. What we got going on, though, is we have our next seminar coming up. We do them about every other month now. We had one here in late Jeff came, and so did his partner. They several familiar faces, and a lot of people from out of town, because I've been engaging with those folks since then, and a lot of people that drove an hour or two to come to the seminar.
So you mean Guy Hester come with him?
Yeah, he was there.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah, and I've had a meeting with him since. So they do a lot of real estate, and when you deal with estate planning, real estate is a big part of what you do, because that's usually the lion's share of most people's estate, their home, other property that they own, stuff like that. So Jeff, when we're here on Fridays, Jeff is always a source of information, because I'll bring up topics about the way things are deeded, or real estate that's being dealt with in a probate estate or something, and he'll chime in and say, we had that very thing happen, such and such a couple of weeks ago or something like that. So real estate is a big part of what we do, because we deal with property, but most people's assets, like I say, the lion's share of most people's estate is their real estate. And so it's a very valuable commodity, always worth protecting. But the seminar was coming up now is the 12th, September the 12th, which is a Saturday. Seems like we're doing them all on Saturdays now, but that's sort of by popular demand. That's what people want. And so we do, every time it's on Saturday, we do it at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so the next one's over at Pulaski on the Square at the Star Theater. And it's another big venue. So it's like here, we got a lot of room. So, there's always people that just show up and walk in. And I always say on the radio that that's perfectly welcome. Mm-hmm. It happens every time, and it's not a problem at all. We have an RSVP list, but we always know we'll set up some additional chairs and tables just for that. There's some people that at the last minute just can't make it, and then there's some people at the last minute can just decide, hey, let's go, and not a problem. Our RSVP is very loose. Really, the whole reason for the RSVP is, one, so we have enough tables and chairs set up. But the biggest thing is so the girls know how many refreshments to make. Because
So if
there's some kind of unwritten law that says if you run out of refreshments at an event like that, that's like the worst possible thing that could
If
happen.
you didn't RSVP, then and you didn't get any of the good stuff that they serve, then that's the reason you need to do that.
Yeah, well, we're not that strict, but yeah, if we run out, that's like the disaster of disasters for the gals that make the muffins and stuff. So we always have a dozen or two left over because they all go overkill to make sure. And those muffins find their way back home, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
find their way in other places that they don't belong.
Hey, we got a call coming in.
Okay, I didn't even hear it ring.
Good morning, WDXE. You on the air with us?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Well, between Stanley talking about Medicare, Medicaid, and beneficiaries, I had Mr. Prochowski on my mind because I've had major issues rolling over a retirement account and how important it is for the family to understand and know what they have. Won't go into detail about that, but it made me start thinking about the irrevocable trusts in Tennessee, and I ran across an article because I thought, if I'm having this problem and I don't even have one and I've got this issue, how do they prevent it? And according to what I read, that in a retirement account in an irrevocable trust in Tennessee, the grantor generally cannot be responsible. Well, the trustee cannot be the grantor if you're talking about retirement accounts or social, a lot of the assets he's been talking about, and how important it is for kind of people to know about this. And I never really thought about that before because he says they're not assets till the money comes in, but evidently there can be conflicts of interest. I just wanted to throw that out because personally didn't have this for this, but it took me and a bank almost 3/4 of a year to get this resolved. Just wanted to throw that out. In other words, my understanding is in an irrevocable trust in Tennessee, the grantor cannot be the trustee, or a beneficiary can, and I may have that confused how that works. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, good
All right,
question.
there's a lot in there. I'll see if I can unpack it the best I can. We're talking about retirement accounts is what seems to be what she talked about the most. There's maybe a little misunderstanding because when you have a retirement account, we're talking about what we call qualified funds or non-qualified funds. Qualified funds are things like IRA, 401k, which are tax-deferred qualified funds. And even if it's a Roth, it's still a qualified fund. It's just not tax-deferred. Okay, now, I've said many times on the radio here, and I have this conversation often in our family vision meetings with people, and I'll just use IRA as the name for the whole, the group of them. There's 401ks, there's 459s, there's several different plans like that. If you have an IRA, you can't put it into any trust, okay, because you don't own the money that's in there. Let's say I have an IRA I've been putting into, let's say I got $200,000 in there, just for nice round numbers. You cannot put that IRA into the trust because I don't own that $200,000, which sometimes when I say that, people want to come across the table and smack me. It's like, the heck, I don't. That's, I can put money in that. But before you panic, when I say you don't own it, what you own is what we signed up for. And what we signed up for was the future distributions when we reach our retirement years. So we put money in over our life and our working time. And what we're expecting in exchange is when we can start taking distributions at age 59 and a half. And you have to take them at 73, the required minimums, okay? But you can take as much as you got guidelines on what you can take and what you can't take, but you can start taking distributions. So what we actually signed up for, what we own, are these future distributions when it starts paying back to us in our retirement years. As a result, because of that, it is a beneficiary-driven instrument. So you name beneficiaries on a retirement account that says, if I pass away, and there's still money in here, so it's paying out to me in my retirement years, but what if I die and it hadn't all paid out yet? It's still some there. Well, we name beneficiaries, and that can transfer to them as an inherited IRA. So, but you can't put the IRA in any trust because you don't own it. And the only thing you can put in a trust is an asset, and an asset is something that you own. Now, in comparison, you could put it in, but you have to cash. Let's say it's $200,000. You have to cash it out and put the $200,000 lump sum in the trust. But now it's not an IRA or a retirement account anymore. It is a lump sum of money. That what goes along with that, of course, are the taxing consequences and stuff like that. And I like to say, paying the taxes on it shouldn't be the deal breaker because we know when we signed up, but we were gonna pay the taxes when it came back to us, right? So we know that's due, but sometimes what makes it not the best choice is, let's say it's something like $200,000 and you cash it all out so you can put it in trust, and you have to pay the tax on it, 200,000. Like, again, that shouldn't be the deal breaker because we knew that was gonna happen, but what you will have is $200,000 of income, more income in that calendar year. And that could push you into another tax bracket, which is another 2.5%, which isn't that bad, but it usually is not the thing to do because of those things that go with it. So let me just continue on those because they are a unique asset, the IRAs and stuff, and everybody has them. That's what I want to talk about. That's why I talk about them all the time. And it doesn't mean we can't protect them. It means we can't protect them with the trust. Okay, so what do we do if we have this IRA and it's got a fair amount of money in it? We'll make sure we can protect it because it is at risk, and here's why. In 2019, Tennessee changed its laws about IRAs along with, I think, 22 other states. I mean, so it's pretty much everywhere. Before the change, it used to be, when you have an IRA, the I stands for individual, meaning you had the husbands and the wives, and the two wouldn't really meet. And it used to be that, okay, they're not a countable asset, or they are a countable asset when they're not in payout status. But they shift and become a non-countable asset if they are in payout status. So they had a little bit of an inherent protection to them, right? Well, they kind of scrapped all that and just kind of said, okay, from now on, both husband and wife, they are countable assets all the time, whether in payout status or not. And now the wife's IRA is available for the husband's cost of care, or the husband's IRA is available for the wife's cost of care. They're no longer just your individual account as far as using them for the cost of care. So when you have a husband and wife, and the husband has to go into care, because remember, we always kill off the husband first or put him in long-term care first, right? It just saves time, right? Anyway, so if the husband goes into long-term care, his IRA, if he has one, the husband's IRA, that's of course a countable asset that they would expect him to cash out to pay for his care. But unfortunately, since 2019, the wife's IRA is also a countable asset available for his cost of care because of the marriage unit. And so they would expect her IRA to be cashed out to pay for his care. Well, let me put it this way. It's countable that we put into the pot when they determine what the assets are. Okay, whether it gets cashed out and used for his pay is going to depend on what the sum total of all the assets end up being, and then we do the community spouse resource allowance division and stuff like that. But it's available if it ends up being available. And so we deal, which kind of sucks. And I wish, when they did that, it kind of took they've been chipping away at those IRAs since the day they made them. You know what I mean? Just because there's just too much money there for them the government to leave alone. Anyway, so we have to deal with that. And so there is a way to protect those. And it's what we call a crisis strategy. In other words, when I talk at my seminar or anything else, we're talking about long-term care. There's two ways to deal with planning for long-term care. One is pre-planning, something you do way ahead of time, which is our asset protection trust. You put property in this trust long before it even becomes an issue, and then this property is all protected, and it's a very grand tool. But then there's the people that, many that we don't do anything, and all of a sudden somebody ends up in care. And so say the husband goes into care, the wife comes to me and says, what am I going to do? My husband's in care. How do I protect my stuff? We call that crisis planning, because now time becomes a bigger factor, right? Because you're bleeding to death for $11,000 a month paying for the care. And so we call it crisis because you've got to, be quick with it. Now, we cannot put the IRA into the trust because we don't own it. But there is a crisis planning strategy that works very well for those. And here's what would happen if you have the husband going to care and there's an IRA involved. What we can do is we're going to cash it out. Now, as soon as I say that, somebody's going to say, yeah, but then you got to pay the tax. Okay, well, hang in there for a second. Let me finish. I'm not done. What we can do is we can cash it out. And we have 60 days to convert it into a rollover. She mentioned the word rollover. We can roll it over into a similarly taxed instrument. Now, when we do it, we don't need the 60 days. We need like 1 day because we're cashing out for that very reason. So we'll cash it out on Monday and turn it into what I'm going to talk about here in a second on Tuesday. But we have a 60-day window to do that where you don't have to pay the tax. So you literally could cash it out on the first of the month and roll it over on the 29th of the next month and on 59th day or something, you still wouldn't have to pay the tax on it. Again, we do this for that very reason, so that happens very quickly. And what we're going to turn it into is since they're married, we're going to turn it into a spousal Medicaid compliant annuity. Now, it's similarly taxed, meaning, in other words, that the tax deferral is all there. Now, the annuity is going to start paying to the spouse. Now, as the annuity pays to the spouse, now the tax on those payments are owed, just like the IRA owes. So it's very similar. The only big real difference is this annuity is going to start paying back right away. It's what we call SPIA, a single premium immediate annuity. So we buy this thing with one premium, which is the cashed out IRA, and then it starts paying back like the very next month. So we did one today. The first payment will be sometime in September. And it pays back to the spouse, and every dollar in there will be paid to her, and it'll all be fixed. Now, when it pays to her, there's a couple of things we take into consideration. One is we can control how long we want to pay this thing back. We can do it really, really fast. I think the fastest we can do it is like 4 months. So, if you have a $200,000 IRA and you want to pay it back in 4 months, you're talking about a $50,000 check 4 times, right? And we can do that. The only limit as far as how long we can stretch it out for is whoever owns the IRA. We cannot exceed their actuarial life expectancy. When I say that, I get question mark looks on people's faces. The government already figured out how long we're going to live, right?
Yeah.
It's called the actuarial tables in Title 42. And you go to that, and you go down the column that you go to the one that says male if you're male and female if you're female. You go down to where the age is. You go across, and it tells you how many. Say like 8.7 years is your lifetime, actuarially. You don't have to worry about keeling on that day, but it's actuarial. And so what we can do is we can do this annuity, but we cannot make it any longer than that. So to put it in perspective, you can't be 95 years old and go and enter into a 40-year annuity, okay? So that's one of the compliant issues. When I say Medicaid compliant, one of the compliance issues, it's got to be actuarially sound. And so okay, suppose we got 8 or 9 years to stretch it out over. We can do it on the short side for 4 months. We can do it on the long side for 8 or 9 years. Well, how do we make that decision? Well, what we do, it's paying to the wife, right? We look at the wife's health. If the wife is like bad health and we're worried about her going into long-term care relatively soon, we want to pay it back as fast as we can and just take the tax hit, right? As fast as possible. If the wife is in good health, we might want to stretch it out over a few years, maybe not the whole term, but just, it's a kind of a judgment call at the time. And that way we still get it all, but we minimize the tax impact or mitigate it to some amount. So there's a lot of thought process goes into that, but it's a grand tool, but that's how we protect the IRA. So starting with the caller's first concern was these retirement accounts don't go in the trust in the first place. And she mentioned about the grantor and the trustee. In Tennessee, the grantor certainly can be the trustee of a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust. There's nothing that bars that from happening. Sometimes that's not the best choice, but that's something we would talk about if we were in my office and discussing doing that. But it many times is, and that's okay. I mean, there's plenty of court precedent and court law that says that's okay, not just from Tennessee, but federal and that stuff too. But what she specifically kept talking about the irrevocable trust. Now, she's right that when she said something about beneficiaries, and she said she didn't know if she had them confused or not. If you are the maker, and grantor is a synonymous with the term that I use called trustor. I've seen trust called 3 things: trustor, grantor, or settler. I use trustor because we're talking about a trust. The government uses the word grantor. They're absolutely synonymous. They mean the same thing. And hardly anybody uses the word settler. I see it every now and then. But anyway, they all are identical. But the question is, can the trustor be the beneficiary? On an irrevocable trust, she's correct. You cannot. So to put it in perspective, when we do a revocable living trust, which is a great tool, it doesn't give you creditor protection and protect your property from creditors like long-term care. But when you do that, there's 3 parties to that agreement, like any other agreement. You have the trustor, the maker of the trust. You have the trustee, the person that controls the property in the trust, and the beneficiary, for whom is this agreement drafted to benefit. And you are that, revocable living trust. You are all 3 parties, or you and your spouse, during your lifetime. You also have, the kids are also beneficiaries because they'll take after death, but they're not also trustor and trustee. So it's just a slightly different posture of beneficiary, but they will still take. Now, when you are the maker of the trust, the trustee of the trust, and the beneficiary of it, you have 100% control and access to everything. I mean, in other words, if you want to change your trust, all three parties have to agree to the change. And if you're all three parties, makes it pretty easy to change. And if you can't agree, if you can't get those three parties to agree and you're all three of them, then you need help I can't give you. But you see where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
So because you have all this access and control of the property, do whatever you want, put it in, take it out, spend it, give it away, burn it. I mean, you can do whatever you want. There's absolutely no restrictions what you can do with the property of the trust, whether we're out of the trust. And because you have all that access and control, you don't get creditor protection. Okay. And so when we do the asset protection trust, it is an irrevocable trust, and it kind of, I think the word irrevocable is an unfortunate name because you can revoke an irrevocable trust. I'll get that in a second. Sounds like a bunch of lawyer double talk, right? Irrevocable trust, and you're going to revoke it.
Yeah.
The difference between the revocable trust and the irrevocable trust, there's two things. One, the trustor, or she said grantor, the maker of the trust, cannot be the beneficiary, and that's what gives us the creditor protection we want. Okay, so you can be the maker and you can be the trustee, but you can't be the beneficiary. That's what gives you the access and control, and if you have that, you don't get creditor protection. The other thing that irrevocable means is you, the maker of the trust, cannot revoke it unilaterally. So I tell people, you can revoke an irrevocable trust. And then I pause for a few seconds because I know they're going to say, well, that sounds like a bunch of legal double talk. And our trust code is very clear on how to do it. I mean, you certainly can do it. But in an irrevocable trust, you have to involve the beneficiaries when you do that. Because when you have an irrevocable trust and you name somebody that gets property, you have created an interest in property for them. Okay, that's why you need their permission to do it. When we do these trusts for parents and families, it's usually, I've only ever had to revoke these, I want to say twice, maybe only once, but it was for some odd reason, not even a reason for what we deal with, right? It was for some reason we need to do it. But so, we can do it. You can revoke it. So I don't like the name irrevocable because I heard somebody once on the radio say, what's the difference between a revocable and irrevocable trust? And they said, well, I don't know. I guess one's revocable and one's not. And that is not the answer. But and the reason they even call the trust revocable living trust, this is another thing. I'm not sure where these names come from. Someday if I want to exhaust a few million brain cells, I'll give it some thought, but I don't, it's low on the list. And it's like, why do we call it a revocable living trust? I know why we call it living, because you do it during your lifetime. It's not a testamentary instrument that happens at death, right, like a will. So, but why revocable? And I did find some explanation, and as far as I really felt like digging, hardly anybody revokes them. I mean, sometimes when people get divorced and they have joint property in a joint trust, they have to revoke the joint trust, and many of them then do have an individual trust, right? But still revocable living trust. So it gets the name revocable because you can change it, and you can modify it, and you can amend it, and you can make any change you want, all the way up to 100% change of revoking it. Okay, that's, I think, how it gets its name. I still don't think it's I think it's just legal, just trying to make it difficult to understand is what I think. But so when they say revocable trust, it sounds like you're saying preemptively that it's going to be revoked, and that's really never is. And it's just saying that that's how much change you can make to it, all the way up to scrapping the whole thing, 100%. And when you name beneficiaries in a revocable living trust, there's no property right when you name them because of that, because you can change the beneficiaries with a stroke of a pen. I had a lawsuit. It was somebody that came here, and they came from California, and they were getting, they changed the beneficiaries on their trust, and the beneficiaries weren't happy about that, and so they sued. But they sued out in California. So I was co-counseling with an attorney out there because the defendant was here, and we found some case law both in Tennessee and California, which we decided those were the relevant jurisdictions to deal with. Case law in both states that adopted federal case law, so the language was all the same, that the court actually said, in a revocable living trust, you are a beneficiary at the whim of the trustor. He can put you in Monday, he can take you out on Tuesday. There's no harm, no foul, because you have if you receive, it's in Southern terms, if you receive, it's gravy, right? It's just pure gravy, a pure windfall to you. Take it and be happy. But they said if they want to take you out, they can take you out for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all. They don't need a reason to do it. You are there at the trustor's whim. So they put you in, they can take you out, and you can't cry foul because you don't have no entitlement in the first place. Okay, so that the revocable living trust is much more, has a lot of versatility because of that. But when we get into asset protection, and you want to say, I'm worried about protecting my property from long-term care, that won't do it because of that access and control that you have.
Yeah.
So, was there?
No, well, somebody did, and I thought,
Well, I didn't hear it ring until you pushed a button and it started ringing. So,
well, I turned the ringer.
but you can see it, but I can't see it, so I don't know when the call's
I'll go
coming.
ahead and need one of those little lights up here, like we got on WLX, that when the phone rings, the
Oh,
light
okay.
will flash.
Yeah. That way the ringing doesn't go out all over the air.
Yeah. That's the only reason I turned it down.
No, and that's okay. You can see it. I can't. So
Yeah.
I just didn't know if I needed to stop talking and I will for the call. But
No, you talk.
sometimes when I want to train a thought, I kind of like to reach the end of it before I jump. Otherwise, it's hard to get back to. But that's that. Now let me think. There was something else. I think that's what pretty much covers what she had asked.
Yeah.
And for people to know what they have, as she said, it's very important for people to know what they have. I agree with that. Because a lot of people have stuff, and surprisingly enough, they don't know what it is. They get it seems like a good idea at the time. They get sold certain insurance. Not that it's a bad thing. It's just that they don't understand what it's for.
Yeah.
Like life insurance. There's a big misunderstanding about something as simple as life insurance. Let's say you have a $300,000 life insurance policy. I have people tell me when they list their assets, we got $300,000 with New York Life here on this life insurance policy. And it's the same thing with an IRA. I kind of have to tell myself, well, you don't really own that. They said, yeah, we do. It's $300,000. Look, it's here. It says right here on the policy. I said, that's what they call a death benefit.
Yeah.
You don't have that. You actually have to die for somebody else to get it. I mean, so you have no ownership in that whatsoever. Now, some policies are built with like a cash surrender value, and with which you could possibly borrow against. But if you have a $300,000 whole life where you have cash surrender value, it is considerably less than that. It may be $5,000 or $6,000 or something like that. Just winging it from what I've seen, the cash surrender value is small. Now that is unfortunately a countable asset. So if you have let's try this on for size. You have a $300,000 life insurance policy and it pays to your child. Because you're thinking, if something happens to me, my kids need me, but the best I can do is maybe have something step in my financial shoes, right? Because they're not going to get the love and affection of LB if he's gone, but we can do that. And so you have a $300,000 death benefit payable to your children. If you go into long-term care and let's say it's a whole life, not a term life, because term life has no cash surrender value, it's not an issue. But if you go into long-term care and it's a policy that's got a cash surrender value of let's just say $5,000. That $5,000 is a countable asset to you. They will expect you to cash that thing out and use that for your care. Now you've lost the death benefit. So what we'll do a lot of times with that, we don't want to do that. But that $5,000 will put you over the $2,000 limit, right?
Yeah.
And that's a problem. But so what you need is one of my power of attorneys that I do. They're very comprehensive. And it will give somebody like your agent, like say your wife. Okay, your wife is now our power of attorney for LB, and you go into long-term care, and we want to protect. We talk about that life insurance policy. We really want to keep that so the kids get that. Whenever LB passes, or whenever we go in there and whack them over the head with a frying pan when nobody's looking. But we want to keep that death benefit, right? So if you have one of my power of attorneys, it allows your agent to change the ownership of it. And so they can go in there and go and change the ownership of that from like to them to you, or maybe even to the children. Now it's no longer an asset of yours. We've changed, it's now preserved the $300,000. Okay, so we still have to deal with the value of the cash surrender to some extent, but that's how we can protect that. And otherwise, you just surrender it and get the money. There's nothing going to the kids now. You've been paying into it all this time, and now you just cashed it out, and you're not getting what you actually wanted to get in the first place, which is the death benefit that goes to the beneficiary that you think will need it.
Yeah. So. Good morning, WDXE. You on the air with us?
Yes, this is a continuation. I want to throw out two terms. I don't have a printer, so sometimes I don't know if this directly ties with Tennessee or not. It's called a trust death beneficiary. It sounded like where you can make the, well, anyway, does that mean anything in Tennessee? And the second one was an investment services trust. And is that something different, or is it too complicated for what we're talking about?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
First one is just an odd way of saying, the beneficiaries of the trust get the benefit at death. Okay, like if you have a couple, you can distribute property at the first death, or you can distribute it at the second death. And so, but a beneficiary says, okay, I leave the house to my child, he gets it at death. So he's a beneficiary of the trust, and I don't want to call it a death benefit, but it does happen at death. That's what the whole trust is for, is where's my property go at death. So I'm pretty sure that's what it means. I've not seen the words in that order, but it's got to have the same meaning. There's just no other way to interpret that. The other one's a completely different question, but it's a good one, because I don't think many people know about this. It's called an ISIT or a TI, a Tennessee In-Services Investment Trust. So the T's on the end, okay? In-Service Investment Trust. Now, that'll take up some time, but it's an interesting topic. Now, I don't do those. I have done a couple. I stopped doing them because they don't really are that attractive to people. They don't. Most people that want to do the irrevocable trust with me want to protect their property from long-term care. I mean, 99.9%. Very few people want to protect it for other reasons. But there is a trust in Tennessee. Now, the history behind these are interesting. So I'm going to go way back. It used to be, if you wanted to protect certain property, like if you were in high-risk profession, doctor, attorney, real estate, people where you can get sued at the drop of a hat kind of thing, high-risk profession, and you wanted to protect property, the best thing to do was open these accounts offshore. And the places they could go to are things like the Cook Islands, Neves, and Belize, if I'm pronouncing it right, the Cayman Islands to some extent. But those are the ones that have these jurisdictions and their national revenue is doing these trusts. Okay, you know, I mean, that's like one of the biggest things that they, rather most other than to export products or stuff or produce something, their revenue is getting people come in there and do their banking with them and put these things in these, they're called Foreign Asset Protection Trusts, okay, FAPT. So you would do that. Now, it was a good tool, but the thing that always made me nervous is everything is reliant on a foreign jurisdiction, which you have no control over what's going to change or what's going to happen. Now, they've been doing it for a long time, so it tells me that it's not likely to change on a whim. And that's what, as I said, that's their gross national product kind of thing. So they want to attract people, so they don't change that law very much. But it makes a lot of people nervous, putting a lot of money, and there's billions of dollars in those things. Okay, for people. Now, I want to say 1999, I think that's right. There was some talk among different states and their legislature that they want to keep that money here rather than give it to these little foreign jurisdictions. Let's keep those assets here in America. So Alaska was the first one to come up with what we call a DAP, a Domestic Asset Protection Trust. Structured pretty similar. You could put property in a trust. It was an irrevocable trust. You can put property into it. It's got a few requirements. You put the property into this thing. You cannot be the beneficiary of it by statute. You cannot be the beneficiary. I mean, you can't be the trustee either. Yeah. Maybe that had to do something with when she was talking before. In that particular trust, it says directly in statute, you cannot be the trustee of that trust. Doesn't mean you can't be the trustor can't be the trustee of other trusts. You can. But on this particular one, it says you cannot. And you've got to sign an affidavit saying, I have no existing creditors right now. And then the period of time that it becomes effective is much shorter than the 5 years that we do with the other trusts. It's like 6 months. But it does, the reason I don't do these is because it does not protect you from long-term care. The Medicaid protection we're trying to get, that will not solve the problem because you still maintain the ability, you're still somewhat of a beneficiary on these. You know what I mean? You're still the beneficiary, which is what people want when they send them to foreign jurisdictions. You know, they don't want to just give it and give everything up and just own it. Here they give it up, but you can still maintain some, not only control, but ownership. And you get if you get sued, it's a creditor protection trust, so all the assets that are in the in-service investment trust are protected from outsiders. And like I said, I used to do them because I thought when I first was exposed to them, they seemed like a good tool. The more I looked into it, I spent quite a few hours getting up to speed on it. And it turns out, we fought in the lingo, we call it DAP, Domestic Asset Protection Trust. But when it come time to deal with the cost of getting eligible for TennCare, because you still had ownership of this property, that did not protect it. It was in this trust, it was an irrevocable trust, but it's a very specialized irrevocable trust, and you can maintain beneficiary interest in it. And that's what kicked it out of the ability to protect property for long-term care. So I've done a couple for people that are just like in high worth, high risk jobs. High risk meaning not high risk because it's dangerous, high risk because it's easy to get sued.
Yeah.
You know, so I've done a couple, but haven't done one for a while. And I kind of say that I don't do them anymore because if you don't do something regularly, you don't do it very well. So back then, several years ago, we did them. And what happened was Alaska was the first one to do it in 1999. Now, several other states started chiming in. Tennessee, there's only now at the date, if I'm pretty sure about this, because Connecticut just came on about a year or two ago, but there are 18 states out of 50 that have a domestic asset protection trust. We adopted it in 2007, and there were some modifications to it in 2013. Okay, but we have adopted, and it's called something different in all these states. But in our state, we call it the ISIT, the In Services Investment Trust. The statute the statute that governs it, the chapter escapes me. But if you Googled it, you'd find it. You know what I mean? That if you want to read the rules on it, there's several rules on it stuff. Now, it's an interesting tool. Is it useful? It is very specific. Okay, and it's been subject to attack with some states. As long as we're on this thing, you know, Nevada has a lot of crazy ideas when it comes to trust. Okay, I mean they out there they have trust and say if you put your property in trust, you can shield yourself from child support and alimony and bankruptcy stuff like that. Well, what happened is other states, like Utah in particular, they had a Nevada trust in Utah, and they come out and said, you know what, we know Nevada has this law, and we know we have to give them full faith and credit, but we are not going to enforce a trust that gets you out of debt that offends public policy. And public policy, if you have a child, if you have a bunch of children, you have a bunch of child support, and you just get out of it by putting it into a trust, they said, we're not going to uphold that. And Nevada did not take it to the Supreme Court because they knew darn well that that's something they couldn't have done when they wrote when the legislature wrote it. And alimony, what they used to call alimony, now it's called spousal support, and bankruptcy issues. Those things, they said, these things offend public policy. You know, if you're going to father a child, then you get the responsibility, and you're not going to get out of it. You know, death will get you out of it, but that's all. And even then you won't, because if you have the child and you go through a divorce, you're required to get insurance, right? But so, it's an interesting tool. It probably works very well if it fits the specific circumstances it's designed to protect. Here in small town Tennessee and surrounding areas, I don't see the need for it. Nobody ever asked for it, and if somebody pitches a set of circumstance to me and I think it looks like it might be a fit, I'll say, well, we do have this thing that might, you know, let's talk about this. So she's right, there is such a thing. It has nothing to do with the other thing she mentioned about the trust death beneficiary. But interesting, I mean, you know, she heard about it. I mean, if you would Google it, if you could Google like irrevocable trust in Tennessee, that'll come up. So it is, but we are one of the 18 states. One of the things that attracted me to it when I saw it was, let's say Alabama. Alabama doesn't have it. I'm pretty sure they're not one of the 18 states, okay, but Tennessee does. However, the statute is very clear that if you're in Alabama, you can open up a Tennessee In Services Investment Trust and put property into it and take advantage of our trust laws and get all that creditor protection. There's the only other additional requirement there's two additional requirements. One is the trustee has to be a Tennessee resident, which could be a person or a professional trustee. You know, we have like Cumberland Trust, people that are professional trustees. So you have to do that. And two, the trust has to contain some Tennessee property. And if you read that like an attorney, you know, people say, well, would I have to put my house in that or something? I'm in Alabama, I've got to put my house in a Tennessee trust. Well, let's go back and read the statute again. It has to have some Tennessee property. It doesn't have to be, it didn't say real property, like land, it didn't say money, it didn't say personal property, it said some property. So what I saw that was being done, somebody would go to a bank in Tennessee, open up a bank account, put $5,000 in it, or some amount, okay? And then put that bank account in the trust. Then these people being from Kentucky would now move their $15 million walking horse farm or something into the trust now to get, you know, so there's, for the people that it's not available to, it's available to them through the 18 states that do to them. And I thought that was somewhat attractive. I've never had the request. Actually, I have had the request a couple times, but people didn't go through with it because it gets more and more. If you got a lot of property you want to put in these things, and now you're dealing with putting it in the laws of another state, it makes people a little bit nervous. And you can explain it to them all you want, but if they feel nervous about it and they don't want to do it, they don't do it. So it's not popular. I don't think a lot of them are generated. I saw some statistics a couple of years ago, and it was very, very few. They were estimating how many of those they had in the state of Tennessee, and it was a couple of thousand, but very, very small compared to population. So anyway, she was right. I told you it was going to be a long answer, but interesting one.
Yeah.
So we spent a whole lot of time talking about something I don't do. Which is, I guess, I should have started with that, right?
So
next time, lead with that, right?
if it sounds good to you, don't go to Stan because he don't do it.
No.
He talks about it, but he
The
don't
stuff
do
we talk about, it does sound good to people.
it. Oh yeah.
No, if it sounds a little bit sketchy, I don't do it. And that does. When you hear about what it does, it's like, I don't know if I want to go down that route. So anyway, you say that I had my annual physical last Friday. I wasn't here last Friday, and that was why, because it got scheduled at 9:00 and over in Pulaski, and I thought, I don't know how that got scheduled, but I had to wait 2 or 3 months to get that. So anyway, so I go there, and they had the nerve to tell me I could lose a few pounds.
Really? Where are you going to lose it at?
Yeah, really.
Shave your head?
Yeah, well, when I sit down, that you could probably say that. Anyway, the one nurse there said, she's talking about diet, do this, and for your cholesterol, do this, and she said, basically, if it tastes good, spit it out.
Yeah, that's basically.
And when you said, which is like, yeah, that's a crude way of putting it, but it's pretty much true. So, anyway, I haven't got the blood back, but everything seemed fine. So I do that. You do that every year, just to go see your doctor and talk a little bit, and have them do things that you wouldn't let anybody else do.
How's your mom and them?
Oh, good.
Yeah, all that.
Oh, yeah. How's the family? Well, he just got done looking at the grandchild a week before that. My daughter's in town. She has a 10-week-old, and she did a wellness check with him. And the 5-year-old daughter was leaning right there on the table and telling Dr. Steve about what the 10-week-old likes and what she doesn't like. She was directing the whole show. I wasn't there, but that's what I was told. So anyway, all right. So we got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting conversation. I mean, I enjoyed it. I love going over those topics. So I for folks that maybe want to call in, if you don't, or you're maybe don't want to air personal information, you can call in with your circumstances and just make them generic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just and I'll be glad to touch base with it, because once you hear the generic explanation, then you might want to come talk to me and talk about the specifics and stuff like that. So we feel free to call in. That's what the show's for.
Yeah.
We're happy to spend the time discussing questions that you have, or people can just call in and share an experience. Say, hey, this happened, and maybe we can talk about why that happened or what it was. We're talking about this asset protection trust we do. We protect property. I often tell people that it's a creditor protection trust, and if people will say, "Well, I don't know anybody anything." Well, that's not the creditors we're talking about. We're protecting it from what we call future creditors.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot defeat an existing creditor. Okay. So I did have somebody call me one time and say, after we talked for a while, I said, "Well, listen, I'm interested in that trust you do, but I got to tell you, I have like $180,000 judgment against me. I don't remember going into details of what it was, but once it's a judgment, it's a judgment." Right? He says, "Will this help me at all?" And I said, "I just try to say, it won't. It won't. I mean, you can't defeat an existing creditor. If you could, I mean, you're working an unfair tort on the creditor, because apparently it's a valid creditor because they got a judgment. The court said, yeah, it's a valid debt and you owe it, and we're going to give them an order saying you owe it as a judgment. So, but if you put property in one of these asset protection trusts and a year or two later, there's no time frame, but if you do it after you put it in the trust, now whatever's in the trust is protected from that lawsuit. They cannot use any of that property, like your house or something else, to satisfy that, because it's a creditor protection trust. It was a future creditor. They came around after you had protected the property. So you can protect the property, but you just can't do it to get rid of somebody that's already breathing down your neck. Or it goes even farther than that. You don't have to have an existing creditor. If you even have a reason to believe somebody's going to sue you, okay, that's enough to trigger the Fraudulent Conveyance Act if you hurry up and put it into a trust because of that. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's a very powerful tool, and it definitely bars those creditors. But we have to worry about that part in the very in front. Most people don't have things like that.
Yeah.
I'm just laying out what's possible, you know. So, um, and if long-term care enters your life, it's going to happen during your life, and that represents for most people a future creditor. Or will they ever have that creditor? I don't know. We don't know. It's an if. If they come into your life, it's going to be a creditor. And if you do have that creditor come into your life, it's going to be one of the biggest creditors you've ever had, because they're very expensive.
Mhm.
Now, that brings me to people say, well, I want to put my house in my asset protection trust, but I still owe a mortgage on it. I have a mortgage. I'm still paying on it. No problem. We can certainly put it in there. There's a federal law called the Garn-St. Germain Act that says, you know, if we put it in there, the bank can't pull into that nonsense and say, well, that triggers the due on sale clause and all that. They're pulling that stuff back in the late 60s and early 70s, and federal law preempted that and said, no, can't do that to people. And so you can put it in. But here's a classic example. Now, you don't really have they're not a creditor, because you have a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
What are the terms and conditions of a mortgage? Every month I'm going to pay you, and every month you're going to keep the loan that you're giving me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a contract, terms and conditions. So as long as you're doing what the contract says, nobody's a creditor. There's no harm, no foul, because you're doing exactly what your specific performance, and they're doing their specific performance. They become a creditor if you default on the loan and they sue you and get a judgment for what you owe. That's the creditor we're talking about. But if you have a mortgage already on there, you can't defeat the bank. It's not like you can put this in the trust and then tell them to go pack sand. I'm not making payments anymore.
Yeah.
And the reason is because when we made the trust, we have carved them out by contract as something that already exists. You know what I mean? So they're not exactly a creditor, but it's an existing obligation that you can't just step aside of. I mean, when you think about that, that's totally self-serving. The law would never allow that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
The law tries to be fair to both parties, and that is definitely an unfair tort on the bank. So, but you can still put it in the trust. Your mortgage just goes merrily on. It's nothing changes. It's seamless to you. You write the same check every month to the same bank, and whatever, nothing changes. And when it's all done, you get your release. The bank doesn't care. The only the bank cares about is that you satisfy your obligation.
They got their money back.
Yeah. And they don't even care who pays that. You know, when you pay a mortgage, other people can pay it, other family members.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's paid, that's the contract. It doesn't actually say a check has to come from you. You're on there as being responsible if the check doesn't come for you, and it doesn't come at all.
Yeah.
That's when that comes into play. But anyway, that's a good example of the future creditors of this. But most people, they're sitting around and they talk and say, you know what, I just heard where so and so in the nursing home and it cost a lot of money, and this happened over here. I worry, honey, if either of us go into there, we got stuff we spent all our life building. We spent our whole life working. I've been working for 40 years. You've been working for 40 years or whatever. And we've amassed our wealth, whatever that is. We have this house we live in. It's all paid off. And we got a couple of acres that we get to mow, and beautiful. We have some money in the bank. We put some stuff away for the kids that we want to leave to them. Whatever your wealth is, it's whatever it is, and it's very important to you. You say, well, it's not a lot. The lot part doesn't have anything to do with it. It's yours, and you created it, and it's important to you. If it's 10 million or 1 million or something else. It's worth protecting, okay? And so you start thinking about that. And at that point, you don't have any creditors that we're worried about. So we can easily make this trust, put property into them. We don't have to worry. I very rarely run into situations where something is existing that's an issue. That one gentleman, he ended up not going forward because the only reason he wanted to do it was, and I could tell in the sound of his voice, he didn't expect the answer to be yes, he could get rid of them. He was just like a desperate call. But I rarely have that come up. So, now's the time to do it when you're thinking about doing it. And say, if either of us go into care, we sure don't want to have everything exposed to the cost of care. And why would someone think that? Not just because it's expensive. The main reason to think that is, wait a minute, I've already paid for this. I've been paying for it all my life. I just told you I've been working for the last 40 years. Every single paycheck I got medical has been taken out of it. Part of that goes to TennCare, the Medicaid portion of the taxing. So you pay, and not only did you pay it every paycheck, you have involuntarily participated. You ever get a letter say, hey, it's okay if we take some money out of your check every week and put it towards TennCare in case you ever go into care? Did you get that letter? They asked if it was okay? I didn't either. So we're involuntary participants. And our courts have said, because of course that got challenged, and the courts have said, when you are an involuntary participant, now the benefits from TennCare elevate to an entitlement. not a right, but it's an entitlement. And the reason it's an entitlement is because you're involuntarily participating. And the courts have said it's not a right, it's an entitlement because if you want 10 care benefits, you're entitled to them. It's not welfare, it's not a freebie. You earned it, you're absolutely entitled to them. But you still have to become eligible. You know, that's the income eligibility and the asset eligibility. That's why it doesn't get as high up as to a privilege or a right, because you still have to do that. But, you know, I get people to say, well, you know, that's welfare. I don't want welfare. It's not. There is some things in 10 care that are welfare. I don't even do those things. They exist, but I've never dealt with them. We deal with it. This is an entitlement to get. So I say let's go whole hog and get what's coming to us, right?
right.
Especially if we already paid for it. So anyway, that clock is always wrong. So what do I got left? It's always a minute and a half.
It's right.
Is it?
It's
Somebody
right.
fixed it.
It's right with the.
Well, it must be your presence because it's always off when Jeff is here, almost like a minute and a half. So I never know. But anyway, let's just wrap it up. You know, we do this show every Friday morning from 8 to 9, Bulletproof Estate Planning. And again, if you're listening, you want to call in, feel free to. You know, we genericize your circumstances and we'll talk about it. Or come to my seminar. Next seminar we're doing is September the 12th, which is Saturday. It's at 10 o'clock. We call the seminar Wills, Trust in the Nursing Home. That's what we're going to talk about. It's going to be at the Star Theater, which is right on the square in downtown Pulaski. You can't miss it if you find the square, but the physical address is 105 North 1st Street in Pulaski. Call my office and tell us you're coming and how many people are coming, and we'll have plenty of Miss Tammy's famous blueberry muffins waiting for you, cinnamon muffins. And if Friday night comes along and you say, you know what, let's go to that seminar tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Just come on. There's a theater, and here at the back of the building, we got tons of room. We usually set up extra chairs anyway. You know, it's plenty of places for you. Walk-ins welcome. But you'll hear a lot of great stuff at that. So if you want to call me and talk to me in my estate planning practice, give us a call at Prochowski Estate Law. It's 931-363-7222. Or you can go to my website, which is estateplanstan.com.
Easy to remember.
Actually, this is down to about a minute, doesn't it?
It's we're right at it. But this has been the Bulletproof Estate Planning with Stan Prochowski.
With your host, Estate Plan Stan. You got to have a fancy handle.
With
right?
your host, Estate Plan Stan.
You got to have a cute name, right? We'll have to make one up for you, LB.
Well,
with my producer, something LB.
I don't know if you want to do that or not.
It might stick, right?
It might stick. But Jeff will be back with you next week.
One of these days on this show, because we deal with it, you have to play that song, I Am My Own Grandpa, that family tree song.
Oh, yeah.
That's hilarious.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious.
Anyway, we'll see you next Friday at 8 o'clock. We'll do it all again, you or Jeff.
All right, and appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Keep it tuned in right here to WDXE.
This is WDXE.
Oh, come on.
Rapid shift from bulletproof estate planning to home of